Lake Orion. Welcome to History Now here on ONTV. I'm your host, Anthony Taormina, co-host of Between Taorminas and the host of History Now. Now, you may be wondering, why am I wearing a Colorado Avalanche jersey? Okay. For a lot of you guys who've known me for years, I have a longtime fan of the Colorado Avalanche. I've been a fan of theirs since 1994 when they were in Quebec, and I stuck with them when they moved to Denver, and I'm still a big fan of them to this day. I wanted to share with you guys the topic, obviously of me wearing the Avalanche jersey, is I want to talk about, obviously it's something Avalanche related, and it's the rivalry with the Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings, the hometown team. It's arguably seen as the best rivalry in NHL history from the years of 1996 to 2002, and it's still felt to this day. Actually filming this on the 28th anniversary of, quote, Bloody Wednesday, which I will go over in a little while. And the Avalanche and the Wings played last night, which the Avalanche won 5-2 over the Wings and have won, I would say the Wings have only had one win in the last 8-9 years over the Avs. So it's very interesting to see. All time though, the Wings are 64-49, 1-10 against the Avs, and then 17-17 all time in the postseason. So I wanted to go over the history of their origins and the rivalry and what's been happening since then. And I'm going to start with talking about prior to the move from Denver from Quebec, because the Quebec Nordiques, at that time, the Red Wings were in the Western Conference. Quebec was in the Eastern Conference. So Quebec, however, owns a 21-20-4 all-time record against the Wings before the move, and it was quite unique because it was, for me personally, it was a Red Wings Nordiques game in which the Wings were pounding the Nordiques, in which it was like I wanted it to stop. So, and then I started slowly liking Quebec, and that caused me to start liking Quebec was as a result of a Red Wings game. And my family, with the exception of my brother, are Red Wing fans. My brother is a Dallas Stars fan, and that'll be worth going over for another time. So the Nordiques moved to Denver, and they become the Colorado Avalanche. Now at this time, the Avalanche, the centerpiece was Joe Sakic. He was the center, he was the captain, he was forward. You had great players like Peter Forsberg. You had Patrick Waugh come over from the Montreal Canadiens. He was the goalie. His last game before coming over to the Avs was against the Wings. He was humiliated. It was not fun for him. So he wanted to get a new start after his stint with the Montreal Canadiens. He wanted a new start, and he was able to get it with the Avalanche. And then Claude Lemieux, who we'll go over quite a bit, he played for the New Jersey Devils, who they ended up beating the Wings in the Stanley Cup Finals the year prior in 1995. Now the Wings at this time, they were the standard bearer of the Western Conference. They were favored to win the Stanley Cup, and their 4-decade Stanley Cup drought. They had 62 wins. They were the Norris Trophy champs. The Norris Trophy is basically if you win the entire league. So they're basically the regular season league champions of the entire National Hockey League, the NHL. So, and the Wings kind of were at that time the standard. The Blackhawks were there, the Blues were there, the Oilers, the Canucks. I mean, they were the Stars. They were there. So for the Avalanche to go into the Pacific Division, win the division, but they ended up being the 2 seed. This would begin a trend of many, many playoff rivalries that existed between the Wings and the Abs. Now, prior to their matchup in the Western Conference Finals, the Wings beat the Jets in 6 games, and then they beat the Blues, the Winnipeg Jets they beat in 6 games, and then they beat the St. Louis Blues in a classic 7-game series, which was, I believe that was Steve Yzerman's classic goal in Game 7 to ultimately win the series at Joe Louis Arena. The Avalanche beat the Vancouver Canucks and the Chicago Blackhawks in 2 6-game series, often winning on the road and holding serve at McNichols Arena, which was the arena prior to them moving to the Pepsi Center. For the Wings, this was their back-to-back conference finals. They beat the Chicago Blackhawks in '95 in 6 games. This was the Abs' first ever Western Conference Finals. Had 2 of them in Quebec. So the most important thing when you go into a series is if you're the home team, you want to defend home court or home ice. And in this case, it's called holding serve. It's important to win your home games or your home games. It's important to win your home games. And the Wings were the number 1 seed, so if it was in a 7-game series, there was going to be 4 of those 7 games were going to be held at Joe Louis Arena, which is the Red Wings home ice. And 3 of those games would have been held at McNichols Arena, which was the Avalanche home ice. So the first 2 games of that series, the Avalanche took the first 2. They won Game 1, 3-2, and then they won Game 2, 3-0. So you now have the Avalanche going to McNichols, up 2-0. So the Red Wings are desperate, okay? And it was a bit of a shell shock because the Wings were the number 1 seed. They were favored to win everything. But then now they're down 2-0 to this upcoming, basically, expansion team. And so they had some work to do. Now, they won Game 3, 6-4. It was a very hard-fought 6-4 game because it was 5. Then they scored the empty netter and won. But then Game 4, the Avalanche won 4-2. Okay, so you're going into Game 5 back in the Joe. You are down 3-1. The Avalanche have a chance to close out the series in 5. Okay, a lot of fans in Detroit were shell-shocked. How are we losing to this expansion team? It was very, very surprising for Wings fans it was very surprising. And they were able to win Game 5, 5-2. And it was 3-2 going back to McNichols for Game 6. So, Game 6 is notorious or well known for the Claude Lemieux hit on Chris Draper. It was seen as a dirty play. Draper required surgery and stitches, especially on his face. It set the tone for the rivalry. It got vicious, it got dirty, it got nasty. And it was, at that time, it was seen as an Avalanche fan, it was seen at the time as it was a hard hit. Was it dirty? I mean, in Wings' minds, it was seen as a dirty play. To this day, Lemieux has never apologized to Draper for that hit. Lemieux would eventually go on to several other teams, including in 2001. I'll go over 2001 in a little bit. The Avalanche would ultimately win that series 4-1 and advance the Stanley Cup Finals. At that time, the Western Conference was a little more superior than the Eastern Conference. You really had the Devils and the Flyers really stand out in the East at that time. Whereas in the West, you had the Avs, you had the Wings, you had the Stars, you had the Blues. They all stood out. So in the Stanley Cup Finals, the Avalanche would play the upstart Florida Panthers, and would ultimately sweep and win the Stanley Cup in 4 games. And so the Avalanche's first year as an expansion team, win the Stanley Cup. In the process, they created a rivalry with the Detroit Red Wings that would go into the 1996-1997 season. Now, in the 96-97 season, there was obviously a lot of anticipation anytime the Avalanche and the Wings played. For one, it's gotten a lot more violent, a lot of fights, physicality, but also you had 2 really, really good teams playing each other. So prior in the regular season, the Avalanche won 3 out of the 4 regular season games. Now, the anticipation of Claude Lemieux playing those games was also significant because Claude Lemieux was often seen as enemy number 1. The Wings were extremely motivated, both fans, players, coach Scotty Bowman as well. Darren McCarty was probably the most motivated of them all, outside of Chris Draper. Darren McCarty is often seen as the Wings' enforcer. So basically, if you were going to mess with anyone on the Wings, you had to go through Darren McCarty. Okay? So Claude Lemieux did not play the first 2 games in the regular season because he was injured. And then the 3rd game, the Avs limited Lemieux in terms of his shifts, knowing full well that, how intense the rivalry was, and McCarty in particular and the Wings were out to hurt Lemieux and didn't want that. So now comes March 26th, 1997. This was a very, very big game for several reasons, okay? The Wings, prior to the game, the Wings accused the Avs of shortening their bench in Denver. Obviously, Claude Lemieux was limited. Didn't play the first 2 games, limited the 3rd game in Denver. Now, the Avs would not eat at Joe Louis Arena unless their own chefs cooked food. There was a lot of fears that Wings chefs, Wings fans, anyone associated with the Wings would purposely poison their food. You would have these fire alarms. It was just very, very vicious. And there was a lot of concern. Security was very, very tight for those games. And it was a very ruckus atmosphere. It almost felt like a prison riot at times. Now, the brawl is probably the most notable. It started pretty much Igor Larionov fighting with Peter Forsberg. And there were other multiple fights that were taking place during that time, but this one started with Larionov and Forsberg. So then there were scuffles. Other Wings and Avs players were getting involved in fighting. Now McCarty and Lemieux were out together. So McCarty found Lemieux and just viciously attacked him, punched him multiple times in the face, busting him open. Lemieux had to cover up. Often it's seen as the turtle incident. He was covering up like a turtle. Lemieux was trying to protect himself from the vicious fists that McCarty was giving him. Now, Patrick Waugh came over from the goalie area to intervene. Brennan Shanahan attacked Waugh, and they were fighting. And then eventually it led to the first goalie fight between Patrick Waugh and Mike Vernon. They ended up brawling. So the result of all that occurred. Only McCarty got penalized. He only received a double minor. Okay? Waugh was able to return. Vernon was able to return. They actually had to get Vernon out of the locker room because Vernon thought he was done for the game. But nope. But everybody that was in there all got to come back. The only incident that happened was McCarty received a double minor. There were 18 fighting majors that whole game and 144 total penalty minutes in that game. that Wings fans got a good treat. At that time, the Avalanche were leading 5-3, going into the third period with less than 2 minutes to go. The Wings scored 2 goals to force overtime. Ultimately, McCarty scored the game-winning goal, and the Wings won that game 6-5, sending Red Wing fans happy. And it was very... As an Avalanche fan, you didn't like it. I know I didn't. Wings fans, they were ecstatic. Avs fans, it was a tough game, and also further proof that the rivalry was there. Now, it led to the 1997 playoffs, okay? The Avs were the 1 seed. The Wings were the 3 seed. Now, the Dallas Stars were the number 2 seed at that time. So, everyone would thought in the 97 playoffs, the Wings were the 2 seed. No, the Wings were the 3 seed. So, the Stars ended up losing to the Oilers in round 1 of the playoffs. So, ultimately, with how it works is if you are the top seed, you get to play the lowest remaining seed. So, the Avs were the 1. The Stars were the 2, the Wings were the 3, the Blues were at that time the 6th seed, Anaheim was the 4. So the Avs beat the Blackhawks in 6 games, while the Wings beat the Blues in 6. The Wings would ultimately sweep the Anaheim Mighty Ducks in 4 games, while the Avalanche beat the Oilers in 5 games. So the series, once again, you've got another playoff matchup between the Avs and the Wings. And security was tight. Officiating was tight. In this series, the series started off in McNichols. The Avs held serve in Game 1, winning 2-1. But the Wings took Game 2. The Wings took Game 2, and you know that old saying, road teams winning at home. The Wings won 4-2 in Game 2. Now, the difference was when the series shifted to Joe Louis Arena, the Wings held serve in Game 3 and 4, ultimately winning 2-1 in Game 3, and then 6-0 in Game 4. So now the roles have been reversed. The Avalanche are the number 1 seed, and now they're facing elimination. In Game 5, the Avs won 6-0 before going back to the Joe and losing 3-1. Ultimately, the Wings would go to the Stanley Cup final, break their drought, sweep the Flyers, and win the Cup. As I said, the Western Conference was far more superior than the Eastern Conference at this point. So the Wings would win the Cup that year, but still, you still have that rivalry that's existing between the Avs and the Wings. All right, 1998 season. November 11th, 1997, the first game at the Joe, and the first time this season the Wings and the Avs were playing each other. Because they were both in the Western Conference, the Wings and the Avs played each other 4 times. So there was 2 matchups at the Joe, 2 matchups at McNichols. Okay, so at the start of the game, Lemieux and McCarty were looking at each other face to face, like, you want to go at it, let's get this over with. So they fought again to start the game on center ice. Okay? And a lot, especially on ESPN, felt that was a statement from Claude Lemieux to the Wings fans and the Wings about the issue of the turtle incident, that Lemieux was not tough. Lemieux fought the toughest wing of all, which was McCarty. And in that game itself, the Avs won the game handily. 3-0, 4-0, something like that. And then they would play again at the Joe on April Fool's Day. And that game, and the New Wings goaltender Chris Osgood fought, both of them earning games misconduct. In that case, the Wings won 2-0. Now, there was also a new rival that was beginning to emerge in the Dallas Stars. The Stars were right there with the Wings and the Avs. There were some pundits that were saying that was Dallas replacing Colorado as the Wings' rival. I would disagree. The Stars were competitive rivals with the Wings, but in terms of like physical violence, physical rivalry, that was clearly the Avs. The Blues were always there. The Canucks were there. The Oilers were there. The Blackhawks were declining power at that point. But when it came to, you kind of had your big three, or you could argue big four if you include the Blues, but your big three were the Avs, the Wings, and the Stars. So now we go to the playoffs in '98. The Avs were the 2 seed, but was eliminated by the Oilers in 7 games. The Wings that year were the 3 seed. They eliminated the newly Arizona Coyotes, the Blues, the Stars, who end up becoming the number 1 seed, all in 6 games, and then swept the Washington Capitals to win the Stanley Cup. They're back-to-back, or they're back-to-back years, not, back-to-back, just 2. Now, the Wings and Avs would meet again in the 1999 playoffs. The Avs beat the Sharks in 6 games. Now, it was very different because you had the Columbine High School massacre that took place in 1999, which 2 losers went on a rampage at Columbine High School. The Avalanche wore patches honoring the victims of the Columbine High School shooting. And it was, there was a lot of emotion and motivation for the Avs to honor the victims of Columbine. So in that series with San Jose, originally games 1 and 2 were going to be at McNichols. But they moved game 1 and 2 to San Jose due to the tragedy and how it impacted everybody in Littleton or in the surrounding areas in Denver. And but the Avs played very inspired hockey and was able to beat the Sharks in 6 games. The Wings would sweep the Ducks in 4 games. So at that time the Avs were the 2 seed, and the Wings were the 3 seed. Now, in this case, the Wings won games 1 and 2 in Denver, 3-2 in overtime, and 4-0. Then the Avs went to Detroit and won games 3 and 4, 5-3 and 6-2 respectively. Then they went back to Denver, basically a 3-game series. The Avs shut the Wings out 3-0 in Denver before winning 5-2 in Detroit. And the Avs would advance to the conference finals, where they lost to the Stars in 7 games. The Stars would ultimately win in 7 games, beating the Buffalo Sabres to win the Stanley Cup. Now, I'm talking about playoff rivalries because the Avs and the Wings would often meet in the playoffs, and they're 2 Western Conference perennial powers. So the Avs and the Wings would meet again. Same thing, just like '99, met again in the 2000 semifinals. The Blues at that time were the number 1 seed. The Stars were 2. The Avs were 3. The Wings were 4. Now, the Blues were eliminated in 7 games by the Sharks. So with how the system and worked in the playoffs was the highest seed played the lowest remaining seed. So the Stars became the de facto number 1. The Avs and the Wings became the de facto 2 and 3 once again. So the Avs won the first 2 games in the Pepsi Center. Last year was the last year at McNichols. So the first 2 games were in the Pepsi Center. The Avs won 2-0 and 3-1. The Wings won Game 3, 3-1. The Avs won 3-2 in overtime before winning 4-2 in Denver. And then a bit of deja vu. The Avs again played the Stars and lost in 7 games. So 99 and 2000, it was a little bit of, deja vu. The Avs were eliminating the Wings. And then before the Avs would lose the Stars. The Stars would go to the Stanley Cup Finals both years, winning one and losing one. So ultimately, it was a situation where it felt like the Avs and the Wings had to go through each other to get the Stars. Now, the rivalry was still there, though not as violent. It was a lot more competitive. The Avs would win the Stanley Cup in 2001, beating the Canucks in 4, the Kings in 7. Claude Lemieux at that time was on the Kings. So the Kings would eliminate the Wings in 6 games. Then the Avs would beat the Blues in 5 games and then win the Stanley Cup in 7 against the New Jersey Devils. Now the Avs were the 1 seed. Everyone remembers Ray Bourque. Ray Bourque was his last chance at a cup. And he was the longtime Boston Bruin, and he ended up playing his final year on the Avs. One of the few players to have his jersey retired both by the Bruins and the Avs. And it was truly one of the most emotional moments in the Pepsi Center, winning the Stanley Cup. And it was just spectacular to see. As an Avalanche fan, it was spectacular to see. So now going into 2002, you've noticed, the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup in 96. The Avs won again in 2001. The Wings won in 97, 98. And the Stars was 99. The Devils was in 2000. You see the dominance of the Western Conference, particularly the Wings and the Avs at that time. They would meet again in the 2002 Western Conference Finals. The Wings were the 1 seed, the Avs were the 2 seed. The Wings were the Norris Trophy winners, the Avs were the defending Stanley Cup champions. The Wings beat the Canucks in 6 and the Blues in 5. The Avs beat the Kings and Sharks both in 7 games. In Game 1, the Wings won Game 1 5-3. The Avs won Game 2 4-3 in overtime, essentially, canceling each other out going into Game 3, which was in Denver. The Wings won Game 3 2-1 in overtime. The Avalanche won Game 4 3-2. Very competitive series. Going into Game 5, 2 of those games were at the Joe, and the other one's at the Pepsi Center. The Avalanche won Game 5 2-1 in overtime. The Wings were facing elimination going into Denver. I truly felt the Avs were going to win Game 6. It was a missed opportunity. Very bitter about that game still. The Wings won 2-0. And then came Game 7. As an Avalanche fan, I hated it. We were at my 8th grade celebration at Scripps Middle School. I was keeping an eye on the Avs and Wings game. Then I hear our superintendent say, 1-0 Wings. Everyone's looking at me. I'm like, beginner's luck. Then it was 2-0 Wings. You hear cheers. Then 3-0 Wings, 4-0 Wings, 5-0 Wings, 6-0 Wings. Wah gets pulled. Then it was 7-0 the Wings. I had to go into the teacher's lounge because everybody was all celebrating in my face. It was very, very difficult to swallow. 7-0. It felt like an end of an era in many ways. It hurt. Still hurts to this day. God, I hate it so much. The Wings won the Cup that year, beating the Carolina Hurricanes, in 5 games. A lot of Wings fans argued that the Wings won the rivalry following that game because so many changes took place, especially with the Avs. A lot of players started to leave. Players retired. The Wings stayed a major Western Conference power while the Avs began to decline. 2003, the Wings were the 2 seed, lost to up-and-coming Ducks, the Ducks in 4 games. The Ducks would go to the finals that year, including beating the number 1 Stars in 6 games, and ultimately losing to the Devils in 7 games. The Avs that year were the 3 seed, lost to the up-and-coming Minnesota Wild in 7 games. 2004, the Avs were the 4, beat the Dallas Stars in 5 games, lost the Sharks in 6. The Wings were the 1, beat the Nashville Predators in 6, lost the Calgary Flames in 6. In 2006, the Avs were the 7 seed, lost the Stars in 5 games. The Wings, the 1 seed, lost the Oilers in 6. You notice why I'm talking about these other teams. They're stepping up. There's a lot more parity. You have the Ducks, the Flames, the Predators. Later, you had the Blackhawks. You had the Wild there. The consistents often were also, the Wings were considered the consistent. Then you had declining powers, sadly. The Blues, the Avs, the Stars were often seen as that. The Wings and the Avs would meet again in the playoffs in 2008. The Wings were the 1 seed. The Avs were the 6. Avs beat the Wild in 6. The Wings beat the Preds in 6. The Wings won the series 4-0. 4-3, 5-1, 4-3 again at the Pepsi Center, and then ending the series 8-2. And they were led by particularly Johan Franzen, who was often the Mule, was his nickname. He was often seen as an Avs killer. And it was very every game I would watch the Wings and Avs around this time, you would hear Johan Franzen, and it would drive me crazy as an Avalanche fan because he would be an Avalanche killer. The Wings were starting to dominate. And it was just really, really difficult to watch. Now, the Wings would make the playoffs every year until the 2015-2016 season. The Avalanche, at times, would finish last place in the West. The Wings would move to the Eastern Conference in the 2013-2014 season, opening new rivalries. With the Maple Leafs, the Habs, the Montreal Canadiens, the Habs, and others, while decreasing their rivalries with the Blues, the Blackhawks, the Stars, the Avs. The Avs maintained their rivalries with the Stars, the Blues, the Wild in the West. They would meet again in the Stadium Series. The Avs won the alumni game 5-2. Both McCarty and Lemieux played in the game, as in many other Wings Avs alum. Also, Chris Draper played in it. Steve Yzerman played in it. Fedorov played in it. Rob Blake, Tanguay, Forsberg. Ultimately, the Wings would win 5-3. Darren Helm played a role in that game as well. He scored the game winner for the Wings in that game. Also, we would begin to see the Avs start returning to the playoffs again on a consistent basis, starting the 2018-2019 season. When you've got new players like Nate McKinnon, Cale Makar, Landeskog, eventually Nichushkin. Just the Avalanche were starting to return back to their former glory. We're starting in the 2018-2019 season with the Flames, the Sharks. ultimately winning a Stanley Cup in the 2021-2022 season. Darren Helm was the only player to ever win a Stanley Cup for both the Avalanche and the Wings. He won the last Stanley Cup in 2008 with the Wings and won the Stanley Cup with the Avs in 2021-2022. The Conn Smythe Trophy. It's in the same season. Nicholas Lidstrom, Cale Makar. Lidstrom did it in 2001-2002. Makar did it in 2021-2022. The Avs currently have a big win streak. They had a 10-game winning streak over the Wings, was broken last year, and is currently on a 3-game winning streak. So, the Avs have won 13 of the last 14 against the Wings. And hopefully, as an Avalanche fan, that trend continues. Will it? We'll see. There's a documentary related to the rivalry called Unrivaled. It was on ESPN. My view on it is I'm a little bit more, I'm skeptical. I liked it. Don't get me wrong, I liked it. It obviously focused on the rivalry, but it mostly did not. It focused more on the 96, 97, 98 kind of. It focused around that time frame, whereas the Avs and the Wings continued playing each other in 99, 2000, 2002. Looking back at that, I wish they would have covered that more. I do know about the Konstantinov injury and the paralyzing, the accident. They kind of combined that with the Wings and Avs rivalry. It was very interesting watching that. I thought it was a very good documentary. Was I skeptical? Yes, because I wish they kind of would not have. They could have done a separate one on Konstantinov about the accident and everything. They just kind of combined it all into one. McCarty and Lemieux do shows together where they will speak about it together. They'll sign autograph sessions about it and everything. So they've patched some things up. They've made up. They still will do shows together. The legacy of the Wings and the Avs, or the Avs and the Wings, it's the best rivalry in the NHL, hands down. Violent, you had your emotions on both sides. You had fighting, you had great hockey, you had 2 top teams in the Western Conference playing each other. It's still talked about to this day as kind of the standard bearer of the rivalry when it comes to NHL rivalries. Who knows? Maybe they'll see each other again in the Stanley Cup Finals. Obviously, the Wings moved to the Eastern Conference. They only see each other 2 times a year. So you value every one of those games. It definitely, hopefully one day, they might play each other in Stanley Cup Finals. Who knows? Hope it happens. We'll find out. All right, Lake Orion, that's it. Have a great day. See you soon. As an Avalanche fan, go Avs, go. You may have your different opinions on it, but, I'm proud to be an Avalanche fan. All right, Lake Orion, have a great night, and hope to see you soon.